Greetings from Glasgow, Scotland. This is the Healing Diaries, our second session. We're focusing on beginnings today. Before we get started, I'm going to do an overview of the reading and the questions for your prompts. But before we get started, I wanted to just do some housekeeping. Go over what I've seen so far on Wet Ink. I'm really thrilled with how much many of you are writing, and I know a few people just joined in the last couple days, so we're hoping to hear more from them, but I'm glad everyone got started, and also very happy that Virginia Woolf was so popular. She's a great love of mine, and she's just a fabulous mellifluous writer, so can't get enough of her. If anyone wants more Virginia Woolf, I can post more in the resources. And also thank you so much for all your reading suggestions. I'm trying to figure out how to get those more directly onto the site. So if you want to upload a link or a video, there is some way to do that, and I don't know how to do that yet. But in the discussions, when you're bringing up those works, keep doing that. And what I'm doing is I'm trawling through those and I'm adding them to the bibliography, or I'm checking them out, and I'm finding them so interesting. So many works that I had no idea about, and they definitely are worthy of bringing in. So thank you. As that keeps happening, just mention them. Absolutely. Also, I know some of you are nervous about word limits. Don't be too bothered by them. Those word limits are meant to be surpassed, or you can go over or under, and I will read them. What we have going is a kind of commentary from other writers in the class, and that will continue, but we're going to start more serious critique. And when that happens, which is next week, I think those word limits maybe become a little bit more important, because everyone will have these blocks to read of 2,000 words from other writers in the group, and that gets heavier. So those prompts will get shorter, or you don't have to do as many of them. And then the emphasis goes on the workshop portion. So that we are just about to switch to that, although there always will be prompts, so that when you're in the your non-submission week, you still have prompts to do, and everyone will still have at least one prompt to do every week. But keep going the way you are right now, and you will be hopefully ready, most of you, or half of the group, to submit early next week, by Monday if at all possible, on your first piece. It doesn't have to be finished, but you are going to just send to all of us the 2,000 words, which they could have been written before the course started. You can take a prompt and expand upon it and make that longer, go to a different depth with answering a question. So that is soon. Yes. I think that was everything for our notes on the website, and I will do an announcement about the workshop too, the workshop portion starting soon. So for this week, we are going back to origins, different kind of origins than our word roots. These are where the sort of episode, incident, instance, place where things changed in a person's life dealing with illness or disability. So it's some kind of status change. It's some kind of change to the body. It's some kind of noticing that's happening. And all of our works deal with this, and then they go beyond it. So we have different authors and essays, and then one piece of fiction as well. I'm not seeing so far that that as a group you're focused on fiction, but tell me if that is your interest. Sort of speak up, because I have lots of fiction to share, and I can always give fiction prompts, and we can always make sure that that genre is included. It's certainly, it's actually my genre. So I will always, I will always cite some fiction. But the majority is nonfiction for this week. And we have Suzanna Callahan, Brain on Fire, which is a book about an encephalitis that she had, an autoimmune encephalitis, when she was a reporter at the New York Post, and had a very strange genesis as a disease. Laura Hillenbrand, who is known for two works of nonfiction. She's a best-selling author for Seabiscuit, which became a film, and Unbroken. I'm not sure if Unbroken was adapted to film, but she's just a tremendous storyteller. And this is an essay that appeared in the New Yorker in, I think it was early 2000s, that I uploaded, called A Sudden Illness, and that is about her chronic fatigue syndrome. And then Roxane Gay, the memoir Hunger, and which is great read, and I will be reading from that in a few minutes, and several of the exercises relate to it. And then she's also known for the work Bad Feminist, a lot of essay writing, and I'm trying to think if she has a novel too. I think she writes fiction as well, but I know her nonfiction better. She's sort of a towering figure right now in the essay world. And Kazuo Ishiguro, who you might know from novels like Remains of the Day. He wrote Never Let Me Go right here. And he's also a master storyteller. This will read differently than the other works because, of course, it's fiction. So it's really about kind of an alternative world to ours that's also familiar. I'm going to read the beginnings of each one of these just to point out a few features of them and to get you thinking about where to start your own writing, and if you have a start already, to consider a new start. And especially this idea of a sort of inciting incident or a catalyst, something which suddenly sort of created this leap in terms of symptoms, in terms of difficulties, in terms of transformation, just where things turned upside down. Because where things turned upside down is not always dramatic at the outset. It can be, but it can also be much quieter than that. And so I have examples of that kind of close look at much gentler stirrings. And I think that is a place that everyone should go to and see if it is a mine for you, as it has been for me. So some of these writers have really gotten me to think about my own story that I have to tell and where I should look for it. So this is from Brain on Fire, and I'll just read the first paragraph. Maybe it's called Bedbug Blues, Chapter 1. Maybe it all began with a bug bite from a bedbug that didn't exist. One morning, I'd woken up to find 2 red dots on the main purplish blue vein running down my left arm. It was early 2009, and New York City was awash in bedbug scares. They infested offices, clothing stores, movie theaters, and park benches. Though I wasn't naturally a worrier, my dreams had been occupied for 2 nights straight by finger-long bedbugs. It was a reasonable concern, though after carefully scouring the apartment, I couldn't find a single bug or any evidence of their presence. Except those 2 bites, I even called in an exterminator to check out my apartment, an overworked Hispanic man who combed the whole place, lifting up my sofa bed and shining a flashlight into places I had never before thought to clean. He proclaimed my studio bug-free. That seemed unlikely, so I asked for a follow-up appointment for him to spray. To his credit, he urged me to wait before shelling out an astronomical sum to do battle against what he seemed to think was an imaginary infestation. But I pressed him to do it, convinced that my apartment, my bed, my body had been overrun by bugs. he agreed to return and exterminate. So there we have this bug bite that begins it all. But is that the bug bite that starts an infectious disease, or is it some figment of her imagination? Is it a kind of sudden paranoia that's just sprung out of nowhere? That is the question. And the emphasis to that last paragraph is a kind of, there's first this context on New York at that time where there were bedbug scares and bedbugs sort of appearing everywhere. And so they're sort of in the media, they're people are aware of these infestations. I kind of vaguely remember this actually, and it makes my skin crawl. So it is a repulsive beginning. And from there, she kind of questions, whether this was a legitimate concern, because an exterminator comes along and he questions whether this could possibly be, when she has no sign of bed bugs outside of these dots on her arm. She brings up, could this have been just some kind of hallucination? And that places us in the realm of the mind, which is, and then the brain, which is the subject of this memoir. Then you have A Sudden Illness by Laura Hillenbrand, and I'm going to read the first page of this to you right now. And it's called, the subtitle, How My Life Changed. We were in Link's car, an aging yellow Mercedes sedan, big and steady, with slippery blonde seats and a deep strumming idol. Lincoln called it Dr. Diesel. It was a Sunday night, March 22nd, 1987, 9:30. Rural Ohio was a smooth continuity of silence and darkness, except for a faintly golden scene where land met sky ahead, promising light and people and sound just beyond the tree line. We were on our way back to Kenyon College after spring break. Link, my best friend, was driving, his arm easy over the wheel. My boyfriend, Borden, sat behind him. I rode shotgun, a rose from Borden on my lap. Slung over my arm was a 1940s taffeta ball gown I'd bought for $20 at a thrift shop. I was 19. The conversation had dropped off. I was making plans for the dress and for my coming junior year abroad at the University of Edinburgh. My eyes strayed along the right shoulder of the road, a white mailbox, the timid glint of an abandoned pickup's taillight. The pavement racing under the car was gunmetal gray. We were doing 50 or so. A balled-up bag from a drive-through burger joint bumped against my ankle. A deer. At first, he was only a suggestion of an animal emerging from the darkness by degrees, a muzzle, a sharp left eye. Then the headlights grasped him. He was massive, a web of antlers over his head, a heavy barrel, round haunches lifting him from the downward slope of the highway apron. Briefly, his forehooves rested on the line between the shoulder and the highway. I saw his knee bending, the hoof lifting. He was stepping into the car's path. In the instant that I spent waiting for the deer to roll up over the car's hood and crash through the windshield, I was aware of my body warm in the seat, Link's face lit by the dash, Borden breathing in the back, the cool sulfur glow of the car's interior, the salty smell of the burger bag. I watched the deer's knee and waited for it to straighten. I drew a sharp breath. The bumper missed the deer's chest by an inch, maybe two. The animal's muzzle passed so close that I could see the swirl of hair around his nostrils. Then he was gone behind us. I blinked at the road. My eyes caught something else. A brilliant light appeared through the top of the windshield and arced straight ahead of the car at terrific speed. It was a meteor. It burned through the rising light of the horizon and vanished in the black place above the road and below the sky. My breath escaped in a rush. I turned towards Link to share my amazement. He was as loose as he had been, his eyes slowly panning the road, his long body unfolding over the seat. I looked back at Borden and could just make out his face. They had seen nothing. The level of detail in this excerpt is extraordinary. Laura Hillenbrand has been very careful in her choice of detail, and she has really rendered this encounter with the deer in slow motion. But not only that, she's gone over the details more than once. And that is sort of key, because she will return again to this event. At the very end, she felt that this was the beginning of her illness, this sort of hyper awareness of the deer, how everything stopped for it to cross, how it almost hit the car, and then missed the car, and how a meteor shot across the sky within seconds. I mean, this is supposed to have happened, but no one else witnessed it. Is it in her mind? Well, it's definitely in her sight, and she is starting to observe something very soon after in herself, which is a real change in how her body feels, in her level of energy, and that continues to go downward over the months and the years. So just to skip ahead to the very end of that essay, while I was lying there, I began to believe that we had struck the deer back in 1987. They had come through the windshield and killed me, and that this was hell. In the depth of illness, I believed that the deer had crashed through the windshield and ushered me into an existence in which the only possibility was suffering. I was haunted by his form in front of the car, his bent knee, the seeming inevitability of catastrophe, and the ruin of my life became. I'd forgotten the critical moment. The deer's knee didn't straighten. He didn't step into our path. We didn't strike him, and I didn't die. As sure as I was that he had taken everything from me, I was wrong. So that is a kind of unwinding of those same images. Okay, Hunger by Roxane Gay. This is the longest excerpt that you'll have for this week, and I'm just going to read a couple selections here. Everybody has a story and a history. Here I offer mine with the memoir of my body and my hunger. Very simple opening. That is part 1, chapter 1. The second part starts with the second chapter starts with, the story of my body is not a story of triumph. This is not a weight loss memoir. This will be no picture of a thin version of me, my slender body emblazoned across this book's cover with me standing in one leg of my former fatter self's jeans. This is not a book that will offer motivation. I don't have any powerful insight into what it takes to overcome an unruly body and unruly appetites. Mine is not a success story. Mine is simply a true story. Chapter 3, to tell you the story of my body. Do I tell you how much I weighed at my heaviest? Do I tell you that number? The shameful truth of it always strangling me? Do I tell you I know I should not consider the truth of my body shameful? Or do I just tell you the truth while holding my breath and awaiting your judgment? That third chapter is a bunch of questions for the reader, because once we start going with Hunger, we realize that she just keeps restarting, that Roxane Gay doesn't know where to begin this. She does, and it is eventually so much further back and kind of seemingly unrelated to what happened to her with her very uncomfortable weight gain, and weight gain to the point of many ailments and trouble that was in different systems of her body. And that incident was actually this. Chapter 5. What you need to know is that my life is split in two, cleaved not so neatly. There is the before and the after. Before I gained weight, after I gained weight. Before I was raped, after I was raped. That's the story right there. And another thing I want to note, so much good writing here. Chapter 8. These are all very brief. I am marked in so many ways by what I went through. I survived it, but that isn't the whole of the story. Over the years, I've learned that the importance of survival and claiming the label of survivor, but I don't mind the label of victim. I also don't think there's any shame in saying that I was raped, because I became a victim, and to this day, while I am also many other things, I am still a victim. It took me a long time, but I prefer victim to survivor. Now, I don't want to diminish the gravity of what happened. I don't want to pretend I'm one of the triumphant, uplifting journey. I don't want to pretend that everything is okay. I'm living with what happened, moving forward without forgetting, moving forward without pretending I'm unscarred. This is a memoir of my body. My body was broken. I was broken. I did not know how to put myself back together. I was splintered. A part of me was dead. A part of me was mute and would stay that way for many years. I prefer victim to survivor. Back to our words. and those words that you highlighted from a medical perspective about illness or illness or disability last week. Thank you for those. This is Roxane Gay saying, I'm one more than the other, and that's victim. And I want to underline that, and I want to bring meaning to this again because it's being overlooked. So that is also important to note, and it made me rethink what that means when she sort of brought attention to those terms and how survivor gets overused. So this is our last excerpt. This is Never Let Me Go, Kazuo Ishiguro, chapter 1. I'm just going to read you the first paragraph here, and then we'll wrap up and send you on to all your exercises. My name is Kathy H. I'm 31 years old, and I've been a carer now for over 11 years. That sounds long enough, I know, but actually they want me to go on for another 8 months until the end of this year. That'll make it almost exactly 12 years. Now, I know my being a carer so long isn't necessarily because they think I'm fantastic at what I do. There are some really good carers who've been told to stop after just 2 or 3 years, and I can think of one carer, at least, who went on for all 14 years despite being a complete waste of space. So I'm not trying to boast. But then I do know for a fact they've been pleased with my work, and by and large, I have too. My donors have always tended to do much better than expected. Their recovery times have been impressive, and hardly any of them have been classified as agitated, even before the 4th donation. Okay, maybe I am boasting now. But it means a lot to me, being able to do my work well, especially that bit about my donors staying calm. I've developed a kind of instinct around donors. I know when to hang around and comfort them, when to leave them to themselves, when to listen to everything they have to say, and when to just shrug and tell them to snap out of it. There's a lot of hints in there about what this novel is about, but you have to pay attention to words that seem ordinary. Donor, calm, carer. It's definitely medical. It's also very strange, and this is a kind of odd narrator who is starting off the novel with a boast. This is reflective. It's retrospective. She's going to be talking about things in the past. Many of them are, she's 31, and many of these things happened when she was 15, 16, and just after that. You can certainly start at a later point and go backwards and create a kind of retrospective narrative. Absolutely. And that reflection sort of informs and thickens what you're doing. It's just very different. And she is a very different kind of speaker than we have in the other works, which are nonfiction. So that's where we're going to stop today. And good luck on your writing. I look forward to seeing it. Thank you.